Neil Diamond. Great documentary on him on BBC4, I think. Crackling Rosie there. Now imagine being able to see and hear everything that's going on around you, but your entire body is paralysed. That is what happened to our next guest, Kate Allatt, who describes it as like being buried alive. In February last year, Kate was 39 and a super fit mother and businesswoman when she suffered a blood clot on her brain, which triggered a massive stroke. As she lay motionless in hospital, medical staff thought she was brain dead, but in fact she had locked-in syndrome. Kate, who's from Sheffield, could understand everything that was going on, but could move nothing but her eyelids. It took 3 weeks before anyone realised that inside she was alive. Since then, Kate Allatt has had a long struggle to walk and talk and get home to her husband and 3 children. But she's done it. And she joins me in the studio now. Good afternoon.
Good morning, Jeremy.
It is fantastic to see you.
Let me just say, because I'm a big fan, I think your show's fab.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. Well, you were, as I said, super fit mum and a businesswoman, and you had a lot going on in your life, didn't you?
You know, I had a very stressful life. I was busy running my own business. I had 3 kids, a husband who was always travelling abroad. And it was in my 40th year. I was 39. And I'd already booked and paid for to climb up Kilimanjaro. It wasn't the normal route, I might add. It was the most hardest route via the Western Beach. So I was busy.
Yeah.
And I was in training for that.
We've actually got a clip because you're speaking, this is before you had your blood clot. You're talking to Roni Robinson on BBC Sheffield about climbing Kilimanjaro, and here you are.
I've had a bit of a groundhog day moment for the last couple of years. You know, juggling kids, work. You know, a couple of years ago I did a challenge, which was the 3 Peaks Challenge, with some work colleagues, which was a fantastic experience. It gave us all a focus, and it just lifted my spirits. And we raised a load of money for charity. And with the big birthday approaching this year, I thought, you know, I could probably do with another focus, just to brighten up the weeds, basically. So dreamt up Kilimanjaro.
So there we are. And were there warning signs before the stroke hit you?
Do you know, there were, and I think I've learned, don't ever ignore a persistent headache. I've never suffered migraines, and for 3 weeks I had a very painful pain in my head that I was too busy to deal with at the back of my head, at the low down. And yes, I did. But the morning it happened, my husband was so fed up of me moaning about it that he drove me to the walk-in centre. They immediately, whilst I was slurring and losing sense of focus, they sent me to A&E, and the doctor there assumed it was a stress-induced headache and sent me home with cocodamol.
Oh, no.
And then 4 hours later, I had the stroke.
Oh, so if they'd actually done something at that moment, you might not have had it. But anyway, what happened when you had the stroke? You were at home? Was your husband with you?
The boys, Harvey and Woody, were fighting in the bath like boys do. And my daughter was in a room. I was sat in the lounge, and I said to my husband, I don't feel very well. And I was sat on the sofa, and he said to me, I'll get you a cup of tea. And I thought I'd said, what's happening to me? And what he heard was gobbledygooch. Right. I'd lost all focus, and I slumped on the floor in a heap, drifting in and out of consciousness.
Were you conscious when you went to hospital?
No, not until I arrived, and I was drifting in and out, but with terrible leg cramps. I could do nothing about it, and I was shouting.
So we know now that what had happened was that the blood had clotted right at the back of your head in your brain stem, is that right?
In my brain stem.
Which is the worst place.
The worst place, but where it controls all your nerves for everything. So my vital organs were fine, but I felt every pain, but I could move nothing.
So you were put into a medically induced coma initially?
Yes, I was, for 3 days, to shut down my brain, to rest it.
And you then, did you awake from that in any meaningful way?
I woke up to the noise of all the machines. I had a big long tube in my throat to help me breathe because I was on a ventilator. I didn't know that. I woke up and I thought, sugar, who's picking the kids up? With my first thought at 10 to 3. My second thought was, where am I? And my third was, I can't move a thing. And I was absolutely frightened to death.
So you do what I guess everyone does after an accident of any kind. You just try and wiggle your toes and wiggle your fingers.
I did, and nothing happened.
Because did you have a sense of them at all? Or?
I thought in my mind I was making them wiggle, but when I looked at them in my field of vision, nothing moved.
So you could look down at them, you could move your eyes anyway?
I could move, and I could see anything in my field of vision. My head was not able to move, so as long as it was pointing in front.
So you were completely incapacitated?
Totally. I had to rely on everything. I mean everything, and it was not nice.
And you say in your book it was like being buried alive.
It was the most frightening experience of my life. In fact, I would go as far as saying that I was severely traumatised. When my writer helped me write the book, Alison Stokes, she, first of all, my account to her was being very factual. And I think really it's so painful for me to revisit because people were dying, decisions were being made. I learnt to lip read. Because at first the doctors thought I was brain dead. Then my friends and husband asked me some yes-no questions to establish I could understand. But it was 3 weeks until they introduced the letterboard to communicate with me.
So when they asked you the yes-no questions, was that by blinking that you communicated?
Yeah, I blinked twice for yes, once for no.
Right. And what kind of questions were they asking you?
Well, at first it was, are you in pain? Because I was in tremendous pain. I mean, it's fair to say I really wanted a pillow over my head. I wanted someone to do it, but I couldn't. And I'm glad now I didn't, but I would have taken that option. I mean, when you're immobile for so long, every muscle aches. And the thing with locked-in syndrome is, unlike paralysis, you feel everything, but you can move nothing.
So you're in there, you're fully conscious, your mind is as good as it's ever been.
Absolutely.
And you're processing everything that they're saying. They don't think you can hear them, I guess, half the time, do they?
No. And
So
they talk to you they try and be caring, and they're keeping me alive. So for that, I'm enormously grateful. But they tend to talk to you as though you're a very young child, like, how are we today? And they don't talk directly at you. It's around you.
Mm. And did you then at some point think, I have got to try and fight this and get out of it?
No, I'll be honest, it wasn't then. It was 16 weeks before which I decided, sod you all. And it was that. And I'm sorry if I offend, but it was that bloody-mindedness. And if I'm honest, there were 3 real triggers. And I pinpoint those accurately. One was my first review, where they were wanting to discuss me living in a nursing home for the rest of my days, where I'd be a an observer, not a participator in my kids' lives. That made me mad. Secondly, it was my 40th birthday in June, and my family and friends did go to Cornwall and left me, as did my mum, who was in America, and I felt really sad.
So you woke up and there was no one at your bedside?
No. I had a solitary balloon on the end of the bed.
Because the idea being, well, she won't notice if we celebrate somewhere else.
To be honest, I felt, and I understand now why some of the decisions were made, but at the time I felt betrayed. I felt there was it was a vote of no confidence. It was though, you're never going to be any different, so we might as well go.
How interesting.
And I'm not saying they thought that, but that's how I felt.
But also I know you're going to come to your third reason, but the idea that although you could communicate by blinking, although you were in there, you somehow weren't human enough to realise it was your birthday. Or for that to matter, that people actually thought it won't matter to her.
Yeah.
And that was painful for you.
It was, because as a mum, and I love my kids to death, and I did everything for them, but there's only twice a year as a mum you get made a fuss of. And that's Mother's Day and your birthday. Every other time you get taken for granted. And you do the role as mum. So, yeah, I wanted my special days.
Yeah. And then was there a third? There was the review, and then there was the birthday, and then one other time?
I'll be honest with you. I forget the trigger, but one of the most important things throughout was the support and love of my family and friends. And they never, ever, ever told me how bad it was. I knew it was bad by their reactions, but they were being told that I would never walk, talk or swallow ever again. I never knew that. I was blissfully ignorant. I just thought if I practised every hour of every day, I'd willed my body to move and made the new pathways. Once I had those, they would never ever go, and that is what I held on to.
Okay, now we're going to talk some more about it, and let's play some music first. Brooke Fraser, this is new. It's called Something in the Water. We're speaking to Kate Allatt. She's written a book called Running Free about emerging from locked-in syndrome. Brooke Fraser and Something in the Water. We're talking to Kate Allatt, who, just amazing. It was only February last year, Kate,
Yes.
when this happened, this massive stroke, blood clot on the brain, and you end up, as you say, buried alive. You're in hospital. You can understand everything. You can hear, you can see. Could you hear a bit?
I heard everything.
You could hear everything,
I heard
but you just can't move.
I heard the man next door to me had his second heart attack, and the doctors discussed with his relatives the withdrawing feed, but no one comforted me when he died, and I was really distressed because I thought, what if I'm not worth keeping?
I just would have assumed that if you have something like that happen, that the first thing they think is, could this person be locked in? In other words, they're not as unconscious as they look to be. So don't they do routine tests on that?
They don't do, and not that I'm aware of. They did nothing for me. And when they realised I could communicate and understand, my visitors were told in no uncertain terms, do not communicate with her via that letterboard, because when she moves to the rehabilitation ward, it'll be a different system and you'll confuse her. So for 2 weeks, they had to sneak in the letterboard without nurses seeing. Otherwise, I have no way of saying anything.
But you are still there physically, out of it, essentially. Mentally you're there, but your body doesn't work. And a lot of people have read The Diving Bell and The Butterfly, which is by a French journalist called Jean-Dominique Bauby, who he died in his bed and he never got his movement back. But what happened with you?
Well, if I was going to tell you what I think I did, and I'm not here to lecture medics, they're the experts, and I'm just retelling my experiences in the way to hopefully it inspires and empowers others to make the right decisions and to challenge decisions, because I've had to be let's just say I've not been an easy patient, but I think for me every day was a job. With his book, it was, I think, amazing. I read it in hospital, but it was very reflective and very escapist. And for me, I had a job to do. And every minute of every day I practised, and I had really intensive therapy, of which I'm grateful to Osborne for.
And you describe how you just tried at first, could you move one of your fingers? Is that right?
On my right thumb.
Your right thumb
could move a millimetre.
So you suddenly realised that the incredible power of thought had moved your thumb 1 millimetre.
Exactly.
And what was the feeling when you did that?
When that happened, about week 10, I didn't really feel any different because I couldn't do anything with that millimetre. It didn't mean anything to me. There was no functional use. The big issue was my left side, which only moved in May. So from February to May, absolutely nothing. And it was that would mean I would be able to run again.
And were you then, do you think you were opening up new neural pathways by sheer force of will?
I believe so. The way I liken it, and this might be something your listeners can visualise, I sat in my bed and visualised being at the fair, and where you hit the hammer on the button and it shoots up to the top to ring a bell. Well, I imagined every day those pathways getting longer and longer and longer, and eventually I'd hit the button. And that would mean movement.
So the brain is, and we saw, you will have seen this amazing, terrible story in the States of the senator who was shot, Gabrielle Giffords, and the bullet passed through her brain. And the doctors said, we now know that if it passes through the brain in a certain way, the brain is much more agile and supple than we think, and it can rebuild itself without the bit that it's missing. And that's what's happened, is it?
Well, I understand. As I say, I'm no expert, and I understand that I've built new pathways. The old one, where the blood clot was on my brainstem, is always damaged, and that will never recover. But I built new pathways, because I've had to learn to do everything again.
So you started with your thumb, and then a hand, and then what on your left side came back first?
My left thumb, and then my index finger, and then my right big toe, and flickers in my ankle.
And I should say, because we were on the radio, I maybe should have said this earlier, you didn't arrive in a wheelchair, you walked in the studio, we shook hands. Obviously your speech has been damaged, but it's perfectly comprehensible. But actually, just looking at you, I wouldn't know that you'd been through this. Do you still have a bit of a problem walking?
Well, do you know what's funny? I walk now like I've had a skinful, and sometimes people think I'm drunk when I walk, and I have bent little fingers because my tendons shortened from months of immobility.
I can see that, and I was just wondering, so that's actually just the hospital stay that's done that, is it?
Yeah, and to be honest, if that's all I have now, I think I've done very well.
2 bent little fingers.
But I refuse any aids. I started driving in January, less than a year before my anniversary. I've named my car Rocky because he used to inspire me, Rocky Balboa, and from hospital. And I had on my first anniversary, 200 people came to watch me run on my first anniversary 20 yards. Funnily enough, when I was in hospital, 2 things happened that was interesting. One was my favourite nurse, Oliver, came one day on a Monday, and on the Friday before, my youngest son said to me, "Mummy, don't write my name, don't write what you want to say my name, say my name." And I said, "Uddy," and to which him, Harvey and Indy and Mark all cried. And I thought, what's wrong with you? And then all weekend I practiced. On Monday, Oliver came back. He carried a box to my bed, and I said, "Morning, Oliver." And he turned round and cried, and he said, "It's moments like this I went into nursing." And it was and then from then on, they upped the ante on my therapy, on my mouth. But the other interesting story was, at that same time, I said to Oliver, "I'm going to walk off the ward and I'm going to run on my first anniversary." And he said, "Of course you are, yeah, right." And I did. And it's on my Facebook site, Beating Locked-In Syndrome. There's a video of me walking off the ward.
Great. Okay, Beating Locked-In Syndrome. People can have a look at that.
On Facebook.
Fantastic. Kate Allatt, thank you so much for coming in. We're getting lots of messages about you. The book, by the way, is called Running Free.
Oh, do you mind if I just mention?
Please, yeah.
I set up in January my new charity, which, as I say, is not there to lecture medics or therapists, just be there to inspire. It's called fightingstrokes.org. And the other exciting thing is, I've just heard that I've been nominated as Extraordinary Woman of the Year.
Oh, brilliant. Congratulations.
And I'll find out in May.
Congratulations.
So,
do you ever think, but just as you say that, you'll probably hate the word, the super mum, and you were doing everything, the running and the parenting.
Yeah.
And do you ever think that actually you overdid it and you put yourself under too much pressure and that's why it happened?
There is an argument for that, and maybe I did, I'll never know. Maybe I had a bang on the head. Sledging, I used to love sledging. But I know one thing, and that is I'm a much nicer person. I really want to help others. I feel very lucky to be here. And I've been to see Michelle Wheatley, Frank and Linda and the Parkies, and I'm desperate to help people like that who are still battling. And if that's what I do now, that makes my life worthwhile. And whilst I might have a lot on, the stress of employing people and paying bills has all gone, so I feel like I'm retired at 40.
Thank you so much for coming in. It's inspirational to meet you. Adrian in Sheffield has just called and says, Kate, what a woman. You're changing my life as you speak. Thank you for being on the radio today. Tonya Lucas in Sheffield says, I was in hospital with Kate Allatt last year. This is Tonya. We knew each other from the gym, but I ended up in the bed next to her when I fractured my skull. She is an amazing woman. Even through all of her suffering, she remained chirpy and positive. John Coyne in Leeds says, please pass on my best wishes to this remarkable woman. What a very moving interview. Roy Mittens in Crouch End says, I've got MS and I recently had a major relapse and I was paralysed, but I could still talk. Kate Allatt's kind of bloody mindedness got me through it. I gave myself a stiff talking to one night. I pulled myself together and I forced myself to make a recovery. And one more. Alison in Torquay says, I've been feeling sorry for myself this morning because I'm under notice of redundancy, but having listened to Kate's story, it has made me realise how unimportant that is. Congratulations, Kate, and thank you for putting my feet back on the ground. Lovely to see you, and we wish you all the best with your continued recovery and love to the family as well.
Thank you very much, and keep doing what you're doing.